ARY Rosenbaum here with another fun-filled episode of that 401k podcast. This week's topic, we're going to talk about buying other businesses and the 401k issues that come up from time to time. One of those issues that many plan sponsors acquiring other companies just seem to miss. But of course, first things first, go to that 401ksite.com. February 4th and 5th is our national virtual conference. I'm going to try within the next few weeks to line up some more speakers. As far as live events go, there is the issue of a possible Major League Baseball lockout. And when it comes to events, I like firm dates. Nothing worse to tell everybody there's a date and you got to cancel it or whatever it is. But the fact of the matter is that I can't go through the trouble of taking people's money, plan sponsors' money, a plan provider's money, sponsorship money, and scheduling events, and then dealing with the situations of whether they have to be moved or canceled. I had like 3 events from 2020 that had to get moved back to 2021 because of COVID, and I'm not interested in doing that. So that does not mean we will have 2020. That does not mean that there won't be 2027 events. What we're going to do, I think, in 2027, play it by ear, but we're going to schedule about 1 to 2 events at non-MLB stadiums. We haven't done a NFL stadium in quite some time. We'll look to that. That's quite a possibility. But I am also looking towards going back to Vegas, so that would be at a hotel casino, and some other ideas that have popped into my head, and we'll see what happens. We'll get bids, we'll proposals and all that kind of stuff. But rest assured, there will be events in 2027. I think Vegas is very, very likely for March. I have a date in mind. I've reached out to one hotel in particular. And we'll hear back, and hopefully we can announce something. And of course, like I said, I'm looking to outside the box. I've even thought about Lambeau Field in Green Bay, but I don't know if there'll be that many advisors that could attend. Looking at the travel, it's kind of 90 minutes from Milwaukee. I don't know if people would do that. If you're interested, let me know. I'm thinking about it, and I got something in mind for my area, but let's talk about that another time. So go to that 401ksite.com, sign up for the events. Go to Amazon for Kindle paperback versions of my books, especially Full Circle and that 401k Plan Provider Handbook. And the fact of the matter is that, when it comes to buying another business, it's really exciting. It really means your company is growing, adding new customers, entering new markets, and all that stuff. The due diligence part is not fun. It's very exhaustive. It's important for buyers to review financial statements, tax returns, customer contracts, leases, pending litigation, all that kind of stuff to make sure you're getting what you're buying. Too often in purchases, somebody's lying, someone's overstating something. And I've known through a lot of acquisitions that retirement plans are often treated as if they're simply another employee benefit that can be dealt with after closing, or something that doesn't exist. And, we have ERISA and IRC, Internal Revenue Code, issues dealing with fiduciary obligations and all these kind of rules, regardless of who owns the business. If retirement plans, if the issues aren't identified before the acquisition closes, it can be more expensive to fix. So that's why it's important to focus on this issue. And most business owners think that all issues regarding a purchase are, dealt with at closing. And in reality, it's really just the beginning. The success of an acquisition depends on how smoothly the two businesses come together afterwards. This means integrating employees, payroll, all that kind of stuff. And it's always interesting when they talk about these issues regarding plans well after the closing date. And that's a problem. Everybody's assuming somebody else is dealing with the retirement plan. So a lot of times after closing, I'm getting the call about what to do, when it should have been planned out during the whole due diligence review period. And, again, it's like outfielders calling for the ball. If nobody's going to call for the ball, ball's going to drop. And that often what happens in these acquisition, processes and review periods. And by the time someone really discovers a problem, it's kind of too late. But not every acquisition is structured the same way, and the structure certainly matters when it comes to retirement plans. An asset purchase obviously produces different consequences than a stock purchase. So, it's a question of which is which. In many asset purchases, the seller is going to retain the retirement plan unless the parties negotiate for the new owner to assume with a new corporate structure and EIN. That's what happened when I worked for companies that got taken over. In a stock purchase, the retirement plan often remains with the acquired corporation because the corporation itself continues to exist under new ownership. So it's important to understand what the structure is in terms of the deal, because it will help answer several important questions. Will employees remain in the existing plan? Should the seller's plan be terminated? All that kind of stuff. Are there liabilities that remain with the seller or transferred to the buyer? These aren't really questions that should be answered the week before closing. They should be part of the due diligence period. And, due diligence, in my mind, is certainly more than just reviewing the 5500 for glaring problems, like, they don't have a bond or something. Too often they just, like I said, they do that cursory 5500 review, and, it's provide some useful information, but to tell you the errors that are going on underneath the hood. It's like, like checking out a car. You look at the car from the outside. Oh my God, that's fantastic. You check under the hood, ride the car around the block, you may discover problems. And, a proper review, and I've done that in the past, you got to look at the plan document, amendments, SPDs, trust agreements, service agreements, investment committee minutes, and records of any IRS or DOL examinations. Buyers need to determine whether required amendments were timely adopted, whether annual compliance testing was completed correctly, whether employer contributions were made on time, and whether participant notices were distributed when required. It's really important to ask whether the plan has experienced operational failures. Have employee deferrals always been deposited timely? Have eligible employees been allowed to participate when they've been acquired, and all that kind of stuff. And if you identify these issues before closing, it certainly could present options that may not exist afterwards, like not taking over the plan or terminating the plan and whatever it may be. Starting a new plan and then maybe merging the assets out or so whatever. And the fact of the matter is that payroll can certainly make or break the transition. Retirement plans live and die by payroll, even though I still contend that payroll provider TPAs don't know what they're doing. Payroll, and TPA work are two different distinct things. But, the fact is that most operational failures aren't going to happen because someone just said, I want to violate ERISA. This is what I want to do. Nobody ever does that. It happens because payroll wasn't updated after an acquisition, employees were coded incorrectly, or communication departments broke down. Payroll determines when employees become eligible, how often they defer, how employer matching contributions are calculated, whether catch-up contributions are handled properly, and whether loan repayments continue without interruption. A payroll mistake doesn't just stay in payroll. It kind of works its way around other issues because it will involve everything else with the plan. It's like a virus. It really becomes a retirement plan compliance issue, and before the transaction closes, buyers should understand exactly how the payroll operates of the company they're buying. So because retirement plan data flows between payroll, the record keeper, and the TPA, and a smooth payroll conversion often determines whether the retirement plan transition is uneventful or becomes a correction project. And obviously, control group situations can change everything. One of the more technical issues is an acquisition can also be one of the most important. Ownership changes can create control groups or affiliated service groups that didn't exist before the transaction. Why does that matter? Because businesses that were previously independent may suddenly have to be treated as one employer for many retirement plan purposes. That may affect eligibility, coverage testing, non-discrimination testing, contribution limits, and several other compliance requirements. There's certainly been situations where I've seen where newly acquired employees should have entered a retirement plan months before, but no one no one understood the ownership rules, and we have to make a corrective contribution for a missed deferral opportunity. These mistakes are costly because it's going to cost the employer to make additional contributions that they probably didn't have to. Spending time understanding the ownership structure before closing is far less expensive than correcting mistakes afterwards. It's important to decide the future of the seller's plan. Every acquisition has that same question. What happens to the seller's retirement plan? Sometimes termination is the best option. Listen, if you're buying a company from somebody who didn't know what the heck they were doing with the 401k plan, then it's probably prudent to terminate the plan. Of course, you have successor plan rule issues to discover, whether they exist or not. Sometimes you may want to merge assets into the mothership plan. Sometimes maintaining two plans may make sense. Maybe they want to save on an audit. There's so many ideas that can work out in an acquisition process. There isn't a universal answer because every acquisition is different. The decision really depends on business objectives, plan design issues, employee demographics, administrative costs, and the timing of the transaction. The important point is that the decision should be intentional. Allowing events to dictate the outcome usually produces unnecessary complications. Employees already experience enough uncertainty during an acquisition. They wonder whether they'll keep their jobs, who they'll report to, and whether the compensation or benefits will change. The retirement plan shouldn't become another mystery. And believe me, when you've been part of a company that gets taken over, it's not good. I'll never forget working for a law firm that was associated with Mobius Tech, which was a TPA, and a guy by the name of Dan Sussman was one of them. It was a company that had too many owners, too many mouths to feed, and the guy running the place, a guy by the name of Dan Sussman, who's no longer in the retirement plan space, thankfully. When Mobius Tech was getting purchased by CBiz, he said, "You have nothing to worry about." And I remember I was 27 years old, and I said to my father, when somebody tells you not to worry, it's time to worry. And that's really what happened. It was just one thing after another, and within 3 years, I had to look for another job because CBiz's business was being sold off to Bisis, which is now Ascensus. So it's important that plan participants are informed of what's going on. Clear communication goes a long way towards reducing confusion and stress for these employees. Employees should understand which retirement plan they'll participate in, when payroll deductions will begin, whether their investment elections are going to carry over, this, and that. They also need to know who to contact when they have questions. Good communications go a long way, and won't eliminate every concern that employees have during acquisition, but it's certainly going to go a long way to building confidence and prevent misinformation from filling the void. It's important also to review the retirement plan team. An acquisition is a good enough time to provide an excellent opportunity to evaluate the professionals who support the retirement plan. That doesn't mean everybody's got replaced, but it's a good time to review. Look who's part of the team, who still fits in. Good service providers shouldn't lose business for no reason, and it's important though to determine whether the current team satisfies the needs of the plan. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And I think it's important to have a risk counselor during any of these transactions. And of course, so many times I've been asked to review the ERISA stuff after the deal closed because the corporate attorneys, don't know much about retirement plans and don't care to know about retirement plans. They know due diligence, they don't know 401k. Timing certainly matters more than you think. Many retirement plan decisions are driven by deadlines. We got deadlines for participant notices and payroll conversions and plan mergers and terminations and all that kind of stuff. And waiting till the week before closing to involve retirement plan professionals can queer the deal. The earlier the ERISA attorney, TPA, payroll personnel, record keeper, and financial advisor become involved, the more flexibility you have to make sure that there's an efficient transition. Early planning almost always produces better results than trying to solve issues under the pressure of a closing date. The cheapest correction out there is prevention. You go through the process of reviewing the plan, fix any mistakes voluntarily. It's far cheaper than for the IRS and the DOL to catch an error. I just dealt with a client. Well, I got an advisor asking me about a client who just got an IRS notice about a missing 5,500, which is closing the door on the VFCP program. That's the nature of things. Corrections are certainly going to consume management time, professional fees, and internal resources, but it's far cheaper to do it voluntarily than to have the IRS and or DOL agent doing it for you. The retirement plan is obviously part of the deal. Business owners really certainly devote a lot of attention to financial due diligence because they understand that unexpected liabilities can dramatically change the value of an acquisition. Retirement plans really deserve that same level of attention. They represent legal obligations to the employees, fiduciary responsibility for plan sponsors, and ongoing compliance requirements that just don't disappear because the purchase agreement is signed. A successful acquisition isn't measured solely by whether the closing occurs on schedule. It's measured by how successfully the combined organization operates 6 months and 6 years later. Making retirement plans due diligence part of the acquisition strategy is certainly going to make sure that there are no surprises. I hate surprises. Like so many things involving ERISA, the best way to solve a problem is to, nip it in the bud. So that concludes this week's episode of that 401k podcast. Like I said, go to that 401ksite.com. We got the virtual event free to be a part of and attend. It can be free to sponsor if you sponsor one of our live events. And like I said, I think Vegas is certainly a likelihood for 2027. I want to steer clear of the MLB ballparks in case of a lockout. And of course, pick up our books on Amazon, Kindle, paperback versions of the last 2 books, Full Circle, that 401k Plan Provider Handbook, and tune in next week for another fun-filled episode of that 401k podcast. Take care. Bye.